Diddle-a-dum-dum, British Strongman podcast. Today we are going to cover squatting for strongman specifically. So Shane, take us away. What are your go-to things when you program squats for people who are assuming the goal is to get better at strongman? What are your kind of pillars in your head that you stick to with your programming, where you like to?
Well, first of all, I like to look at kind of how actually good they are at squatting, first of all, because my opinion on squats has changed a lot over the last couple of years. And I used to keep them in as quite a focus, really, all the time. And I still like to focus on the squat in certain phases and kind of push it up a little bit with a really intense squatting phase. But I won't do it all year round. But if someone was like terrible at squats and they had like really weak legs, I would still probably focus on it for a lot of the year for that person until it got up to a reasonable standard, just because it has so much carryover to leg drive on log, axle, dumbbell, stability under yoke. There's loads of stuff it carries over to. But for the most part, I think that it shouldn't be a focus. And I also think there's benefit to rotating through back squat, front squat, safety bar squat, and not kind of keeping it as a focus, like basically to like a low bar back squat. I wouldn't keep a low bar back squat in all the time. I'd rotate to like a high bar, a front squat, a safety bar. And for me, I think at the moment I'm kind of happy with 1 day a week squatting, and I wouldn't really push the frequency more than that for most people, just because I think that there's, better ways to spend your time in the gym to get better at the sport of strongman. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, similar thing really. But I don't really use back squats that much, apart from I want to make sure that people are competent using back squat for when it does come, because it will inevitably come up in a comp. But I suppose more experienced I've got, the more confident I've got that basically submaximal squatting of some variation does transfer over nicely to, say, maximal squatting when you need it. So basically what I'm saying is that in my head, I like to squat submaximally with a real priority, prioritizing technique and positions. I don't like people monging and grinding squats out, because I just think, well, they might as well be grinding a deadlift out if they're going to grind something out, or they might as well have a bit more energy to grind out a set of yoke or a heavy set of farmers or something like that that's a little bit more specific. And I suppose at first, maybe a couple of years ago, or whatever, like I just thought it was like such a pillar that we needed to keep good. But I've kind of moved away from it personally, and felt loads better for it, to be honest. Like everything's improved loads since I've backed off on the squatting, but I still feel like I could, say, do an 8-week peak for a comp and be competent with it. The thing that I've noticed as well is that I believe that as long as you're getting like kind of some neurological stimulus with the lower body, that it'll transfer nicely to the squat. So like we touched on last week, actually, when we're talking with Max, like I actually believe that, like, say, the neurological stimulation that you're getting from say heavy deadlifting regularly, like I think this is you're not gonna get, most people are not going to get they're not going to build a massive deadlift and then not be able to kind of squat with a decent weight with a little bit of skill practice, if you will. What do you think, Shane? Can you think of examples of people in your head like that got like a massive deadlift but are really actually poor in terms of force production on squats? And I don't mean like the shit skill, like the lifting a shit number. I mean like.
I mean, I guess no. I mean, Curtis has got better. I was going to say Curtis then, but Curtis has got a better squat. But here's the thing: like, it's in my head. I compare a deadlift, like a raw deadlift, for example, to a high bar back squat in sleeves. But
Right.
when you start going low bar in wraps, I'd compare that more to like a suited kind of
Yeah,
body,
yeah, okay.
just because of the assistance of kit and stuff. You know what I mean? But and Curtis isn't the great. I mean, it's just mechanical, really. But he's not the greatest high bar back squatter. But you put him low bar and wraps, he's mastered that skill of getting more out of the wrap and the hinge. So then, it kind of starts getting closer to the numbers you kind of expect. But no, I do agree. But also, it's hard to say because, like, depends on the background of the person as well. Like, most people come into strongman through some kind of gym training where they've done a lot of squats, already got a kind of baseline at them, if you know what I mean. So I agree that if someone's got like a baseline level of strength from the squat, then I think it's fine to tick over with it. But if someone came to me with like a shit squat and like small legs, for example, to me it would be real beneficial to just squat a little, not all the time, but squat a little more for, 3 or 4 months of the year and just get 20, 30, 40 kilo on it and then maintain it again. And then at a later stage, try and do the same thing. But I do agree that I don't think it should. I used to keep squatting like that all the time for clients, and I don't anymore. I'm happy to tick over with it. But there are certain points in time where I'm like, right, it's been a while since we've pushed the squat. We're going to push it a little bit. And usually it leads to feeling stronger, on the strongman specific movements as well, and the deadlift as well. So I do, especially I think as well, if you leave a bit of time between squat peaks, like 6 months or so, you seem to just like get a lot out of it because you've built all this strength and all these other movements, and it's almost like the body's waiting for you to just push the squat a little bit, legs get stronger, and then you can back off again once you've kind of drained as much as you can out of it.
Yeah. So I think what's difficult for quite a few people is like a few people get into strongman through lifting prior, through coming from like say a bodybuilding background or like say a powerlifting kind of background going into it, where it's kind of ingrained to you that, well, you need to do a leg day if you're bodybuilding, or powerlifting, you need to squats like the first thing on the menu, if you will. Or even like say, if someone comes from a weightlifting background, like like say the high bar squat and front squat is like the main strength builder for weightlifting, really, isn't it? So you can see how people can be kind of subconsciously stuck in that mindset. But a thing that I've noticed is that like I've known loads of people who have got like who squat like a really high percentage of the deadlift, and they've got this massive squat, like relatively. The main goal is strongman or strongwoman. They've got this massive squat, but their overhead isn't necessarily great. The deadlift isn't great, but they want to keep the squatting because they love squatting kind of 2 or 3 couple of times a week because they feel like they're really good at it. So they like doing it, but they're doing it more. But actually, like, are they, like say I can think of a few people who like say deadlifting say 250ish or something, and they can squat 230, 240 or whatever, and they're happy doing that a few times a week. But whereas I think these kind of people can really benefit. It's quite hard for the ego a little bit, but because obviously they're drawn to doing the squatting because they're kind of good at it, if you will. But I think this kind of clientele will actually notice a benefit, like backing off backing off the heavy squats a little bit and ramping up the deadlifts. You know what I mean, Shane?
Yeah, in that scenario, I completely agree. It's like I say, with my application of squat to programming for Strongman, it really does. It's like I hate the fuck. It's it's an easy cop out, but it just depends. Like in that scenario there, yeah, completely agree. I don't think they should be. They don't need to squat. You know what I mean? Adding another 20 kilos to the squat and it overtaking the deadlift in strongman isn't gonna really benefit you. You know what I mean? You could squat, but when I've last time I did an under 90s comp, I probably out squatted the fucking. I mean, there wasn't a squat in the comp, but I had in the gym probably 100 kilo plus on the next guy's squat. When you're loading stones or fucking, you know, whatever it is you're doing, it doesn't really matter what you squat. So in that scenario, completely agree. But then I think as well, say that person you were training him and you dropped his squat back for a little while.
Yeah.
And let's say you put 25 key and he's dead to 275, and then his squat was feeling shy. It was around the 200 mark. It had dropped from 230-ish. I think a little 6-week block of squats again, ramping back to 230, 240, then again drop them back and go try and push the dead. So that way you kind of still keeping that strength there on the squat. You're still keeping the technique at the heavy weights and stuff. And then you're trying to transition that leg strength that you've built to deadlift. And that's kind of how I would do it. But saying that there, it sounds like a quick process. It's not. It might take 6 months to put that 25 kilo on the deadlift, which is why the squat might drop back a little bit if you've been ticking over for 6 months. So then it might take 2 months to ramp it back to a PB. And then again, you might not squat that often again for another 4 to 6 months while you peak towards 300 on the deadlift. So there's loads of different scenarios there, but also unless you're doing certain competitions that, because it just seems to be like, for example, the Opens guys, they all know they're going to have a squatting worlds. So it seems pretty sensible for those guys to kind of train it every week. Not as a massive priority, prioritize it more close to worlds, but they kind of know they have a squat in a comp that's like high stakes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it makes sense for them. But like when you're talking 105s, 90s guys, you might get a squat. Like London's strongest man tends to put a squat in, from what I've seen in the past. But there's not like a set in stone squat event at like England's or something. It's not like, you know, every year at England's I'm going to have a squat. So I just don't think. I think you've also got to look at your comps and stuff. And if it's not that common, then why train it as so common?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about application of it. So, so how I would program squats for people depend. Well, so someone messaged me actually yesterday. One of the clients, I looked on True Coach and he said, "What am I aiming for on this?" It was doing safety bar paused, and then another day he was doing front squats. I think off the top of my head, and he said, "What stance whip should I be aiming for on safety bar pause or whatever?" And then I just thought, what a great question, rather than just thinking just do the same thing, or what is my strongest squat stance. So actually, in the context of strongman, what we're doing is actually using the squat as an assistant usually. So I said to him, I said, let's go. And by the way, I'm not saying this is right, wrong. I'm saying that you can cycle the kind of context in which you apply what you're doing. But I said, let's go for safety bar pause and let's go deadlift stance, deadlift width, deadlift foot position. And then on the front squats, let's go for, imagine you're breaking at the knees like a push press or a jerk. And you're focusing on keep breaking at the knees and keeping that upright torso and loading the legs, blah, 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 blah. So basically using the front loaded squat to carry over to the overhead, the log and the push press and stuff, and using the safety bar to to support with the deadlift and the lower body force production maximal, if you will. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I love deadlift stand safety bars. I think they're an amazing assistance tool. And yeah, I agree. Like with the front squats as well, I think you should be looking to replicate your stance and position, etc., that you're going to be doing on your overhead, because that's your main carryover. Another good one on the front squat that Tom Hibbett uses a lot is the front squat with straps. Have you seen it? Where you get your hands in the log press position, just so you kind of so if you were doing so something I've used in the past is like front squatting prior to log with the straps and just doing it for like speed and position, and then when you go into so it's not tiring, not take very long. Then when you go into your log, you've kind of activated that rack position.
Yeah, quality.
And so that's another way of doing it. But deadlift stance, safety bar back squat, I've used them hundreds of times. I love them. I think they're great. And the way I apply those is I'll either do them after a deadlift session or prior to a deadlift session, because I actually like people to do something before they deadlift usually. I just think it's a better way of warming up and getting firing like neurally is if you do some form of movement, like even bag throwing like we do at yours, like just something explosive. When you then go and pick your first implement up, it doesn't feel like your back's on a snap and it's heavy as fuck. And I think on a deadlift, I like that confidence of doing some safety bar squats first for speed, even if it's not heavy or hard. And then I get to my deadlift and I pull 70 and it feels like it is an empty bar. 120 feels empty, 140 feels empty, 180 feels empty. Whereas if I go straight into deadlift, sometimes it takes me a couple of sets on everything to get going, and I prefer to just rip them fast. So I like to get my clients squatting before deadlifts to activate and prime for the pull, or maybe after the deadlift as like a deadlift accessory, depending on the protocol that we're going to use in the because obviously you don't want to do a hard safety bar deadlift stance session and then go straight into deads, because you're probably going to have fucked your deadlift session. But you could definitely do it afterwards.
Yeah, great. So I quite like putting, like after my max effort deadlift session, say on a Monday or whatever, like I quite like putting like I'll call it like a skill-based knee flexion exercise, basically. So I've been doing like stone loading for ages with the stone of steel dead light, and the main thing for me is obviously I'm building the skill on the implement and the familiarity, but I'm working through that kind of deep knee flexion, if you will. That's just really specific, and honestly, it just feels so good. I'm not trying to say force loads of progress on it or whatever, or work really hard on it. It's just literally familiarity work with like 70, 80 kilos or whatever, but it just feels so much better like every week. And like I'm saying, I'm like maintaining that position. I'm like maintaining that position of I do my first rep. If I go into like a bodyweight squat, this is part of the reason why I don't like training squats a lot, is like because my knees just take so long to just to feel normal. I feel like they're going to snap on that first rep, but I get going and go through the movement and it starts to feel okay. And then I come to squat, say on a Tuesday when I do my heavier front squats at the minute, and they do feel better from doing the stuff on the Monday. So really, even though I'm like only kind of, people think, oh, squatting, you've got to squat with a bar. I'm only squatting once a week. Well, actually, I'm doing once a week with a barbell, and I'm doing extremely light on my first session of the week, like you could call it skill or speed based or whatever. And then I'm doing like a kind of volume accumulation, a little bit heavier later in the week, but I'm doing that with my stone loading. And I'm doing like some really good volume in there where I'm really getting like quite a lot of volume going through loaded knee flexion. So I think people, some people And I'm talking from experience here, right? People need to kind of disengage what they think. I'm saying talking from experience, because this is how I used to think. I used to think, oh well, you need to be ticking it off with it needs to be a barbell on your back, or otherwise it doesn't count. Like a goblet squat doesn't count, and that's just a little warm up exercise or whatever. But actually, if you for strongman, like doing stuff like say sandbag squats or stone squats, or even Zerchers have been using quite a bit with people recently. They're really good. I think, in fact, I'm a big fan of Zerchers. I think the skill element of it is really easy for people to learn and crack on with. You know, like you get some people, you program someone a front squat, Shane, and you don't know, oh, are they going to go cross grip? Are they going to go full clean grip? Are they going to moan about the feeling like they're going to get choked out? Are they going to have a problem with mobility? Whereas you give them something like a Zercher or whatever, they're probably going to say moan that their elbows are a bit sore or whatever. But really, you can't go wrong technique-wise. It's so simple. Give them a couple of sessions doing that, and they realise it doesn't hurt holding in the crux of the elbows and whatnot. So that's a good little thing that I feel like carries over really well to like stones and loading and sandbags and stuff. And I think this is an absolutely brilliant thing to do, an option to do at the minute, where some of us are, well, many of us are training at home, and you might not have a sandbag, or you might not have a stone or whatever. You might have one of those things, but they're outside and it's pissing down or whatever. And saying instead of doing your stone loading or whatever that you might usually do in your program, just do some Zerchers instead of 3 sets of 5 Atlas stone loading. Just do 3 sets of 5 Zerchers or whatever. It can really just plug in as a practical kind of substitute at the minute. You know, when people are struggling to access kit and maybe struggling with their motivation with the weather and stuff like that. It's going to give you a nice option that'll carry over to your loading.
I have never programmed Zerkers, to be honest. I've never even done a Zerker, to be perfectly honest with you, so I couldn't even tell you what it feels like. Just because I've been, I don't know why. I think, like I say, I got stuck in that trap of squatting a lot for years and making people squat a lot for years. So I am partial to a back squat, I'll be honest with you. Although I've come away from it and I'm doing better at not fucking making everyone squat 10 times a week, I still need to scratch my itch and get a back squat in there a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm just saying at the minute, I don't know if you can think of any clients that you have at the minute, Shane, where you might be programming them some kind of eventy stuff or whatever, where they're maybe doing some loading keg or a sandbag or whatnot, and then you come to it and they're just like, they didn't manage to set it up, or it's awkward to set it up, or whatever. Can just be just a really simple thing to, because basically you just set it up in the rack, walk it out from the rack, and it feels not too dissimilar to like standing up a stone or standing up loading a sandbag. But obviously it's just really practical because it's dead easy to do in the rack.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I just I don't know why, but like when I think about doing a Zerker, it trips me out, and I just think, am I going to lose? Even though I know it's fairly safe, it looks like, am I going to pop the bicep here? Because I'm always sketchy about anything that looks slightly sketchy. I'm like, I'm not going to do it.
But yeah, if for people who are concerned about like popping a bicep or whatever, you try it, and you like at first you're gonna be tensing up and squeezing your biceps hard or whatever, and being concerned. But you'll find that if you'll be able to find a position where you can just completely relax your arms and
Does it sit more on like your stomach?
Pardon?
Does it end up sat on your stomach or or is
Oh,
it your arms?
well, more like your elbows, but your elbows can be into your tummy. So,
Right. Okay. I see.
so you're not. It's not like max bicep curl.
Because I know it doesn't feel that bad because I've done Conan's plenty of times, so I know it's not like it's more the picking up off the ground. I feel is bicepy. Or do you deadlift it to lap and then just go under?
No, I'm saying. Sorry, I'm um, giving this example from a rack. So
so you just unrack it and
yeah,
squat.
just unrack it in that position,
Okay, I see.
not doing the full Zercher lift or whatever. Just doing just unracking it in that elbow position.
Right, yeah.
And another reason why I like it is because I can see that it does correlate quite pretty well with say whatever your max stone is. Like I've got a lad who's pushing them at home at the minute now, and he sent me a video. I just watched his Insta story yesterday, and he'd done a 160 stone recently. And he'd done like a 160 Zercher yesterday, and I thought, oh, fucking hell, I couldn't believe it. So I'm thinking for like say next week or whatever, I could say give him. Oh well, actually, I can give him numbers similar to what his stone program would be when he's at the gym. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I could
Jake?
No, Matt.
I thought I seen Jake do some at Zercher. It might not have been him. It might be somebody else. I'm sure it was. He's a bit of a monster, isn't he?
Who Jake or Matt?
Jake. Is he called Jake? The one with the split jerk axle?
Yeah, you nearly did 145 axle the other day.
I swear I seen him Zercher another day. Maybe I didn't, but
no, it was you may have seen him doing front squats. He got folded by 180 front squat.
All right, maybe it was that then.
And you might have seen it on Instagram. He got folded by 180 front squat, and his mates there sat in the armchair with his slippers on watching. Yeah, it was brilliant.
COVID life.
So yeah, couple of things to take away for people. So, my opinion is on squatting for strongman. Like, get confident with the back. Get confident in your competence with a back squat, such as a low bar squat with wraps or whatever, for when you need it in competition, because you're going to shift more weight doing that, and it's going to be more efficient. Use front squats to help build your rack position. Even if you don't even squat and you just hold that front rack position with a heavy load, a bit like we were talking about with Max last week, like, it's going to have great transfer to your overhead. So if you build the leg strength as well to doing front squats in the front rack position, then that's going to transfer greatly to the overhead. In terms of loading events at the minute, if you're struggling to, like, say, access kit or whatever, but you still want to train your loading, like Zerchers are a really great option, and sometimes I use Zerchers with people who we try front squats and they just can't get a comfy front squat position. They can't front rack. They can't do like an Olympic clean grip. They can't do cross grip because they feel like it's choking them out. They're not comfortable with straps. Just get them doing Zerchers, and they can push that front loaded variation very quickly. Yeah.
That's a good wrap up. I would just say with the squat to analyze your kind of strength ratios from dead to squat. And if it's getting a little out of hand, you probably need to do a phase of squats. But the majority of the time, as long as you're keeping your strength ratios in a nice structural balance. And for me, I would say, I think Tom Hibbert says 90% of your deadlift should be a high bar back squat max, which I think is a bit, very high. Because that would mean like a 300 deadlifter. I'm talking about raw deadlift here with straps, strongman style. That would mean that 300 deadlifter would need a 270 high bar back squat.
Yeah, I disagree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah, I think it's
a lot lower,
far too high. But I do think 75 to 80% area, maybe 75 maybe, which would put that back squat more in the like 220 range. I would say if you're less than that, I would say just do a little phase to bump it up to around that area, or go past it a little bit, and then rein off again, and don't put too much focus on it. Do like what Josh says, rotate your variations. If your training phase is focusing on the overhead press, front squat that phase. If it's focused on the deadlift, maybe do the lift and safety bars that phase. And don't be shy to rotate your variations and stances and stuff like that. I think they all have a decent carryover to strongman. Say another nice one, a safety bar box squat's quite a good one for deadlift. It's a lot nicer on the knees because you're able to sit back and get a more vertical shim. And it's just some good application to your deadlift as well. So hopefully you guys got some ideas there as to what to do with your squat training.
Yeah, and the thing with the box squat and pause squats, how they're going to transfer over to the deadlift really nicely are going to be because they eliminate that stretch shortening cycle, don't they? The stretch reflex. Yeah. So adding in a pause, and starting with that, creating a lot of force on the concentric or the way up rather than just bouncing, is going to logically transfer better to the deadlift. So basically, decide on what you're working on in your phase of training, and then pick one of these variations appropriately and to fit your kind of goals at the minute, rather than just randomly doing some squats. Like, hopefully we've given you a bit of an insight in how you can make it more specific to your goal and what you're trying to achieve. Peace out.